The soldier came home from war to find his wife no longer wanted the man he had become. The taxi's brakes hissed, a sound like a long, tired sigh. For Staff Sergeant Leo Vance, it was the first true sound of home in 12 years. It wasn't the shriek of metal on metal, not the guttural roar of a diesel generator. It was soft. Civilized. It was the sound of an ending. "Here you are, sir," the driver said, his voice hesitant. "Elm Street. This is the 1-inch." Leo smelled it before he felt it. The air was thick with the scent of recent rain on asphalt and the sweet, cloying perfume of damp soil and cut grass. It was a world away from the perpetual odor of dust and cordite that had been baked into his memory, a scent he was sure still clung to his clothes, to his very skin. He unfolded himself from the car, his movements stiff and deliberate. One hand gripped the worn handle of a canvas duffel bag. The other held a slender white cane, its tip hovering just above the curb. The bag was heavy with the few possessions he had left, but it felt weightless compared to the 12 years of absence he carried on his shoulders. That weight was a phantom ruck, heavier than any pack he'd ever humped through the mountains of a foreign land. "You need a hand to the door?" the driver asked, his concern a gentle intrusion. "I've got it from here," Leo replied, his voice rough from disuse. "I know the way." He did. Or he thought he did. He swept the cane in a slow, careful arc, the plastic tip tapping against the concrete sidewalk. Tap. Tap. Slide. He remembered pouring this walkway himself one blistering summer, his wife, Clara, bringing him lemonade, her laughter a melody against the scrape of his trowel. He could feel the memory under his feet, in the familiar slope of the concrete leading to the porch. He had pictured this moment 1,000 times. In the suffocating darkness of a firefight, in the sterile white silence of a field hospital, in the echoing halls of the rehabilitation center. He would walk up this path, unannounced. He would use his old key. The door would swing open, and the scent of Clara's baking would spill out. Their daughter, Maya, no longer a giggling toddler but a girl on the cusp of womanhood, would look up from the sofa. And Clara. Clara would just stare, her eyes wide, before her face crumpled in disbelief and joy. It was a scene he had replayed until it felt more real than the darkness that now governed his world. The surprise was everything. It was the payload he was delivering after a long and brutal mission. His cane found the bottom step of the porch. 1 step. 2. He knew there were 2. He stood before the front door, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He could smell the roses he'd planted for their 5th anniversary, their scent a ghostly welcome. He reached for his pocket, his fingers closing around the cold, familiar brass of his house key. He found the keyhole by touch, his fingers tracing the metal plate. But the key wouldn't turn. It grated, refused the lock. He tried again, jiggling it, a cold knot of dread tightening in his gut. This was wrong. This was an anomaly. An unexpected variable in a meticulously planned operation. He ran his hand over the door itself. It was smooth, cold steel. Not the heavy, paneled oak door he had stained and sealed himself. Not the door with the small scratch near the bottom where Maya had crashed her tricycle. It was a different door. A stranger's door. A perimeter breach. The thought was automatic, a reflex honed by years of survival. Assess the situation. He stepped back, his training fighting against the wave of confusion. He knocked. The sound was hollow, loud in the quiet afternoon. He heard movement inside. Muffled footsteps. Then, a voice. A man's voice, deep and unfamiliar. "I'll get it." Ice flooded Leo's veins. He felt his posture shift, his shoulders squaring, his body instinctively dropping into a lower center of gravity. A threat. Inside his home. Then he heard her. "Clara." "No, honey, you stay put. It's probably just a delivery." "Honey." The word struck him like shrapnel. The door opened, not wide, but just a crack. The air that rushed out was alien. It smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and a faint, spicy cologne he didn't recognize. It did not smell like home. And there she was. He couldn't see her, but he knew her presence. He could hear the sharp, tiny intake of her breath. He could feel the sudden stillness in the air around her, the way a forest goes silent when a predator is near. Leo. Her voice was a thread of sound, a strangled whisper of disbelief and terror. Oh my God. It can't be. The man's voice called from deeper inside the house. Clara. Who is it? It's no one, she said, her voice strained, pushing against the door as if to hold back a flood. Go back to the living room, Mark. Please. Mark. The name was a hammer blow to his chest. She slipped outside, pulling the door closed behind her with a soft, final click. The sound echoed in the darkness of his world, a definitive seal on a life he no longer had access to. You can't be here, she whispered, her words frantic. The hope that had sustained him for years evaporated. The scene he had rehearsed in his mind shattered into a million pieces. There was no joyful reunion. There was only this. A woman he loved standing before him, her voice filled with panic, blocking the entrance to a life that was no longer his. He could feel her presence, but it felt miles away, separated from him by an impassable gulf. He felt, more than saw, her recoil. Clara, he said, and his own name felt foreign on his tongue. What's happening? They told me you were dead, Leo, her voice cracked, a mosaic of old grief and new panic. They sent me a flag. A letter. We had a service. It was 7 years ago. 7 years. He had been MIA for 3, then trapped in a coma for another year. The long, agonizing road of recovery, of learning to live without sight, had taken the rest. He had sent letters. So many letters. They had been his lifeline, his connection to the world he was fighting to rejoin. I wrote to you, he said, his voice hollow. From the hospital in Germany. Then from Walter Reed. 4 years. Didn't you get them? We moved, she said, the words tumbling out. After they told me. We couldn't stay here. It was too much. We just moved back last year. The mail, it never would have found me. The silence between them was vast and empty. He could hear a bird singing in a nearby tree, oblivious. He could feel the cool breeze on his face. The world kept moving, kept living, while his head stopped on this porch. Who is he, Clara? He asked, the question a shard of glass in his throat. She hesitated. He could hear the soft rustle of her clothing as she hugged herself. His name is Mark. We're getting married next month. Another blow. He swayed slightly, his hand tightening on his cane to steady himself. He felt like a ghost, an apparition from a buried past come back to haunt the living. The duffel bag at his feet suddenly felt immense, an anchor pulling him down into the concrete. He had imagined this conversation differently. He had imagined explaining his scars, his eyes. He had imagined her hands tracing the raised skin on his face, her tears falling not in pity, but in relief that he was alive. He had never, in his darkest moments, imagined this. Then she said the words that would define his entire war, his entire sacrifice. Leo. I'm so sorry. I grieved you. I mourned you. I had to move on. Maya had to move on. She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was different. Colder. More distant. Anne, look at you. Look at you. The words hung in the air between them. I can't, she said, her voice breaking with a terrible, final honesty. I can't do this. I don't know how. To start over, with this. This. He knew what she meant. The scarred geography of his face. The empty, sightless gaze. The cane. The brokenness. He wasn't the man she had loved. He was a damaged relic, a reminder of a life they had both lost. His blindness wasn't just a condition, it was a barrier. An insurmountable wall she could not, or would not, climb. He had survived the enemy, only to be defeated by the pity in his own wife's voice. The truth of it settled into him, a cold, heavy thing. He wasn't just a ghost from the past, he was an unacceptable future. The life she had built, this fragile piece with a man named Mark, was too precious to risk on a broken soldier. He was a mission she was unwilling to accept. His tactical mind, the part of him that never slept, began to work through the cold shock. He catalogued the facts. Home, compromised. Objective, failed. Family unit, reconstituted with a new element. He was the foreign body here. The intruder. Just then, the front door creaked open again. "Mom. Who are you talking to? Is everything okay?" The voice was higher than he remembered, laced with the cautious curiosity of a teenager. It was Maya. His little girl. A person he had never met. He heard Clara's sharp intake of breath. "Go back inside, Maya. I'll be right there." "But who is he?" she insisted, her footsteps sounding on the porch. Leo stood frozen. Here was his real choice. His true mission objective had always been their protection, their happiness. He could detonate this family's life with the truth. He could storm the breach, declare his rights, demand the life he was owed. He could start a new war, right here on this porch, a battle for a territory that was no longer his. The casualties would be Clara, this man Mark, and the daughter who looked at him as a stranger. Or he could do what a soldier does. Assess the cost. Minimize collateral damage. And if necessary, fall on the grenade to save his unit. He had lost the war for his old life. But he could still control the terms of his surrender. He took a deep, steadying breath, the air burning his lungs. He forced his face into a mask of calm neutrality, a placid expression he hoped would hide the ruin inside him. He turned his head toward the sound of Maya's voice. "It's okay," he said, his voice surprisingly even. "I'm an old friend of your father's. We served together." He felt the wave of relief coming off Clara. It was a physical thing, a silent exhalation that lowered the tension in the air. He had given her an out. He had chosen his path. "I just wanted to stop by," he continued, directing his words to the space where he imagined Maya stood. "To pay my respects. I heard you'd moved back. I'm sorry to intrude." "Oh," Maya said. Her voice was soft. He could picture her, trying to reconcile the scarred, blind men on her porch with the faded photographs of the smiling, handsome father she barely remembered. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers found the smooth, worn wood. He had carved it during his first year away, a small, clumsy bird from a piece of scrap pine. He'd kept it in his pocket through every patrol, every firefight. It was a talisman, a connection to her. It was the only part of him that had survived the war intact. He wanted you to have this," Leo said, holding it out. "He made it for you." He was speaking of himself in the third person, creating a safe distance. He was no longer her father. He was a messenger. A courier from the dead. He felt small, hesitant fingers take the bird from his hand. "Thank you," Maya whispered. He nodded, a sharp, military motion. "I should go." "It was good to see you both looking well," he lied. He hadn't seen a thing. But he could sense the life they had, and it was a life that had no room for him. "Leo, wait," Clara started, her voice a mess of guilt and relief. "It's all right, Clara," he said, cutting her off gently. He couldn't bear to hear her apologies. He couldn't bear to hear her try to explain the inexplicable. "Be happy." He turned, found the edge of the steps with his cane, and started down the path. Tap. Tap. Slide. Each tap of the cane on the concrete was a footstep away from the life he had dreamed of, a life that had become a mirage. He didn't know where he was going. He had no plan, no destination. His entire world, the entire map of his future, had been on this street, in that house. He reached the sidewalk and turned right, walking into the vast, unknown territory of the rest of his life. He did not look back. There was nothing there for him to see. He walked with the ramrod straight posture of a soldier, his face a mask of stone, leaving the ghost of Staff Sergeant Leo Vance, husband and father, behind him on that porch. The war was finally over. He had lost. 6 months passed. The world turned from the green of summer to the burnished gold of autumn, then to the stark gray of early winter. Leo learned the seasons not by sight, but by the changing temperature of the air on his skin and the different smells that rode the wind. He found a small, one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on the other side of town. The constant, gentle rumble of the machines below was a comfort, a mechanical heartbeat that filled the silence. His world was a map of textures and sounds he had meticulously memorized. The 3 clicks of the thermostat, the groan of the floorboard by the window, the precise number of steps from his bed to the coffee maker. His duffel bag sat in the bottom of his closet, still unpacked. He joined a support group at the local veterans center. It was a cramped room that always smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. He sat in a circle with other men who were ghosts in their own lives, men who had brought the war home in their heads and in their bodies. They spoke of the world they no longer fit into. For the first time since coming home, Leo didn't feel like an anomaly. He was just another soldier fighting a new kind of war, this one on home soil. He was learning Braille, his fingertips slowly, painstakingly, tracing the raised dots that promised to unlock the world of words again. It was a slow and frustrating process, but it was a mission. A tangible objective. Read a sentence. Read a page. Read a book. Each small victory was a reclamation of territory from the darkness. His life had shrunk to the size of his apartment and the few blocks he could safely navigate. It was a small perimeter, but it was secure. It was his. One Tuesday evening, there was a knock on his door. It was a hesitant sound, soft and uncertain. Not the sharp rap of a delivery person or the heavy knock of his neighbor. He wasn't expecting anyone. He navigated the short distance to the door, his hand finding the knob with practiced ease. He opened it. "Hello," he said into the hallway. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice he had heard only once before, but one he would never forget. "Hi." It was Maya. He stood motionless, his hand still on the doorknob. His defenses went up, his mind racing. Why was she here? Had something happened to Clara? I hope it's okay, she said, her voice nervous. I got your address from the a center. I told them I was your niece. He didn't say anything. He was listening. Not just to her words, but to the space between them. The slight tremor in her voice. The sound of her shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Mom told me, she said finally, the words quiet but clear. After you left. She told me everything. Who you are. Who you really are. Leo's throat felt tight. He had built these walls around his new life so carefully, and here was his past, standing on the threshold. He could hear her take a shaky breath. I'm sorry. For how we. I didn't know. He remained silent, processing. He wasn't a messenger anymore. He wasn't an old friend of a dead man. He was her father. A fact that hung in the air between them, both a chasm and a potential bridge. She spoke again, her voice a little stronger. Can I come in? It was a simple question. But in his world, it was everything. It was a request for access. An attempt to breach his perimeter. His first instinct, the soldier's instinct, was to deny it. To keep his small, safe world secure from the chaos of emotion she represented. But then he thought of the wooden bird. Of the years he had spent dreaming of her. He had given up his right to be her father on that porch 6 months ago. But maybe he could be something else. He stepped back from the door, pulling it open wider. It was an act of surrender. An act of hope. He was letting the world back in, one hesitant visitor at a time. Yeah, he said, his voice thick. Come in. He listened as she stepped across the threshold, her footsteps soft on the worn linoleum of his small apartment. The door remained open, letting in the cool winter air and the distant, rhythmic hum of the laundromat below. It was the sound of a new beginning, unfolding in the quiet darkness. A new mission, finally underway.